Good evening and welcome to the show. Tonight, I'm doing a deep analysis on the way big tech companies have influenced this election, as well give you a timeline on the outbreak of the CCP virus in China, what that means going forward as a new strain is found in Colorado. If you watch any other language than English, there is an option to turn on auto translation for the closed captioning. Now make sure to click on that option. Quick news update, Senator Josh Hawley has signed on the board to object the electoral voting on January 6th. He is the first official senator to do so. Dozens of House representatives, Republicans in general, have also signed on to object. Now, I have a bone to pick with democracy, and this is just my opinion on it. It is about this whole thing with law. So, if you remember, there's a trial with O.J. Simpson. That case was one of the most controversial in history. It resulted in his acquittal from the criminal charges. The case we know it was that Simpson was most likely the actual murderer. But the jury's verdict was that he was not guilty. He was acquitted of the charges. The point I wanted to make here is that this case represented a loophole in democracy. And that loophole is exactly how the current voter integrity situation looks. The people who committed the fraud know exactly the way that the legal and justice system works, that it would take a long time to find anybody guilty. I mean, it took 11 months for them to put trial on for OJ. What I'm saying is that playing fair and square with these people is a lose-lose game. They're also using this loophole to delay the time. I mean, we know that OJ most likely did it, and there is voter fraud. Both had massive evidence against the person of interest, but both are being ruled improperly. Anyways, just my thought. Let's jump into our first topic today, taking a look at big tech. What roles have big tech companies played during this election? They have been accused of meddling in the 2020 election, and their employees have obtained influential roles within the Biden-Harris organization. At hand, we face many issues related to big tech censorship. Trump has actually been holding a fight against big tech with various tactics. One of the most recent is seeking the removal of Section 230 in the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a spending bill for the Defense Department. The other way Trump has been fighting is through the limiting of visas for high-paying tech jobs. This is just a service problem, though. If you think about it, getting into Silicon Valley is a path to success. It's high pay, it's a lavish lifestyle, it's got moderate culture, good work environment. It's everything you could ask for right out of a university degree. But at the same time, you're actually immersing yourself into a most progressive and democrat culture. But with big tech atmosphere or Silicon Valley in general, it has been dipping deeper and deeper into the Washington politics circle. They need to ensure the maximum benefits for tech companies in the market through making allies in the Capitol. Many are saying that a Biden-Harris ticket might be the return of a Obama-era tech friendliness. But is it that big of an issue? It is. Right now, with how these companies use their fundings or engage in censorship ahead of election is a big problem. Big tech controls three aspects that make their entity itself dangerous. They control information, money, and most of all, influence. Now, these three intertwine in their power creep, which is a term describing the increasing power due to increasing power. For example, there was a report from the Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society, which alleges that $500 million from Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg was given to election officials and used to violate election laws. The money was allegedly used to improperly influence the election in favor of Biden, with the bulk of the funds going to a progressive nonprofit. Imagine this, by simply contributing to a political candidate or organization, you can ensure so much control over their political direction. So this is one type of influence. You have the money going towards political candidates. The idea of political contribution itself isn't new. I mean, it's been done by both sides. Trump has received it, and Biden also has received it. But notice the subtle difference. These political contributions don't directly affect the campaign itself, because that will make it too obvious. What they do is they go to an organization that on the front is just a nonprofit organization, but itself has close ties to the candidate they wish to support. As well, big tech's relationship with the Democratic Party is more apparent in that dozens of big tech alumni have joined Biden's transition team or have gained influential positions in his administration. This is a reciprocal relationship, making both parties happy. Because big tech will get their candidate who will favor the policies of the big tech, and then the alumni can find a job that will work for themselves. Christian Tom, who was announced as the digital director for the Biden-Harris Presidential Inaugural Committee on December 28th, had worked for Twitter, Google, and YouTube in revenue roles before working for Biden's campaign. Facebook alumni also has filled a number of roles in Biden's administration. Former Facebook director Jessica Hertz is the Biden transition's general counsel, and Jeffrey Zients, who is tapped to be Biden's coronavirus czar. I still don't understand why Biden has SARS, but had served on Facebook's board of directors in 2018. The fact that per FCC records, big tech CEOs were major contributors to Democratic campaigns and causes have made Republicans concerned about the close ties big tech have and a possible incoming White House. Long before this year's election, though, the tech companies already frequently flagged posts by users as false, removed accounts, and shut down pages, as well as limit the reach of stories and users. I mean, hopefully this channel isn't being censored. That would be too crazy. It would have made more apparent as we got closer to the election, though, that the social media giants will pump up their censorship control. We saw this with YouTube, which announced that on December 9th, the tech company would start immediately by removing contents pertaining to alleged widespread fraud or errors in this year's presidential election. We had actually recently covered how Facebook's independent fact-checkers are actually hired by the CCP-tied Chinese company named ByteDance, who also happens to own TikTok. I'll link that video here so you can watch it. So exactly how close is big tech and CCP? We can examine this aspect beginning with Huawei and Tencent, two of the largest tech companies in China and around the world. Huawei makes hardware such as phones, processors, security systems, and softwares like cloud computing, AI, and such. Whereas Tencent is a company responsible for developing WeChat, a very popular Chinese messaging app containing many features such as food purchase, online shopping, and recreational abilities. Both companies have a big history providing censorship and spying on the Chinese citizens. Out here in the States, the same roles were fulfilled by Facebook, Microsoft, and Twitter. Big tech doesn't always play well with CCP. I mean, Facebook and Google had tried to launch in China, but did not meet the demand of the CCP. But it doesn't mean that big tech cannot adopt some of the strategies from the communist playbook. Censorship is an international concept anyways. Think about this. When a tech company outlines that what you can say or what you cannot say, it actually becomes one step closer to the level of censorship in a CCP regime. Trump's biggest enemy isn't the Democrat. It's actually everything around it. It's the Silicon Valley's allies and the CCP. And if you cut down the chain between big tech, media, and the CCP, the radical justification from the left actually becomes non-existent. This is why controlling information becomes the #1 priority in China and in the States. In other words, President Trump is no longer facing a cheating contestant. He's actually now fighting against a coalition of judges and administrators who decide the rules and the results of the competition. Along with it is that support network of big tech, media, and activists. But the CCP and the big tech share one common goal: to get rid of Trump. The CCP has also have another agenda, and this is even more apparent as Chinese companies begin to wither inside the US due to Trump's hard digital sanctions. So they must use big tech and media groups to crawl back into the US market. Here's the basic concept. You make people think that the way you want them to, as long as you hold the source of information, or in other words, manage what information is allowed to show. But the problem here is that the very strength of big tech and media is also their weakness. Because trust is everything. If you have trust, you have credibility. But if you lost trust, which we have seen many networks and social media platforms are losing customers, then you need some type of totalitarian enforcement to force people to listen to it. And this is what China did. They forced people to use the exact app and the exact news channel. But big tech in the West can't do that. This may contribute to the fast downfall of big tech, because the Trump administration scored a victory against the Chinese regime in Beijing this year through its Clean Network campaign that booted Huawei out of a critical telecommunication infrastructure in many countries. Now, this was a target of the 5G alliance. The way they did this is utilizing trust. Huawei was exposed for spying on the American people. And this trust issue has become a strategic tool for the US government. Since China passed the National Intelligence Act in June of 2017, all Chinese citizens and companies have to be legally obliged to turn over any information or data to the communist regime upon request. Huawei was the backbone in the CCP surveillance state. The US can't have that. I mean, not willingly, even though big tech companies probably already do so. So as the credibility of the CCP decreases inside the US, it became harder for the CCP to spy on the American people. A part of their massive warfare tactics is now diminished, so they need a different type of extension of influence. What they do is they cling onto big tech. Between Trump and Biden, the CCP wants Biden to be elected. Not only will it loosen up the restriction on Chinese companies in the West, it will also help to build relationships between CCP and the big techs. So really, they may seem to not like each other initially, but the two evils will share a common goal. Why not work together to get rid of Trump? They can simply ignore public opinions. In their mind, they get to decide the president and the future of the United States. It has nothing to do with public opinion or votes. No matter how many rallies you hold, or how many appeals you make into the courts, or how much evidence that is submitted, they can just not cover it or censor it. Isn't this the rise of totalitarianism? All systems act like this in a totalitarian society, and they believe in nothing but power. They think they can hold all the power of information. This arrogance, their mindset is like this. I am this way. What can you do about it? You want to sue me? Well, go ahead, because my people are everywhere, and I have money, and I have power, and I also have connections. Let's see how far you can get. I think everyone who's been following this election since the beginning will feel the same way. These groups are using this election to form an unprecedented coalition, along with the media outlets and big tech. They're acting like rogues. And in China, these same group of people consist of from the CCP officials, political officials, as well as business leaders, and also the media and big tech who happens to also work for CCP. Basically, you just saw the American version of a dictatorship. In China and the US, we see many people try to become part of this group and have to share of rewards, but they've also chosen to defy their conscience and become the devil's advocate. This coalition has already reached a tacit agreement to completely change the content and the manners of the competition. This is where President Trump's biggest difficulties lie. He wants to prove himself to be the winner, but his opponents wants to overturn the rules. They've made a new set of rules, and it's simply disregarding the existing ones. They believe they control the power to make the rules and can modify them at will. And this is why I say no matter how many cards President Trump plays, whether it's the Trump card or the Pence card or whatever card, the opponents can just overturn them all. Let's talk about how the media has been the propaganda mouthpiece for both the CCP and the left. The CCP and the big media corps hate independent news organizations or citizen journalism. For example, recently Beijing's decision to imprison Chinese citizen journalist Zhang Jian over her reporting of the COVID-19 pandemic has drawn strong criticism from both sides of the international groups and US lawmakers. Zhang is a 37-year-old former lawyer who began reporting on the ground in Wuhan during the early days of the pandemic in China. She suddenly disappeared in May. A month later, Chinese authorities announced that she had been arrested. On December 28th, Zhang was sentenced to 4 years of imprisonment after being convicted of picking quarrels and provoking trouble, one of the common charges the CCP uses to imprison dissidents. According to her lawyer, Ren Chengniu, his client was handcuffed to her wheelchair the whole time, and she was not in good health. Because before the Monday's trial, Zhang went on a hunger strike for months to protest her charges. Why does the CCP hate citizen journalists so much? It's because they're hard to control, and they're always exposing the secrets of the government. Same thing with the big tech and the media here in the West. They hate independent media and anyone who actually speaks against the general narratives on those social media platforms. So you see this, naturally there's two entities aligning again. Now this time, the CCP is actually performing a deeper infiltration into media. According to a National Pulse investigation, a 2014 FARA filing from the KUSEF's American lobbying firm BLJ revealed that American media organizations participates in private dinners at BLJ's CEO's home on behalf of KUSEF, as well as trips to China and meeting with KUSEF officials. Now, KUSEF stands for China United States Exchange Foundation, and BLJ is the American lobbying firm for KUSEF. So this list includes many of the biggest and most prominent news outlets in the United States. This official report for the KUSEF also shows American journalists visiting China every year. Same page shows former congressional members visiting China as well. This is one way of the CCP extending their warmest welcome to the American journalists, as well as to ensure that they listen to the CCP when the news breaks out in the US about anything that would harm China's reputation, and to minimize that from happening. Let me just summarize what I said. Basically, big tech has been allowed to make political moves that favors one candidate because of their policies towards big tech. And this has stopped since Trump took office. In order to get rid of him, big tech and the CCP are making friends in an attempt to crush Trump. This has only ramped up following the 2020 election in order to create this image that Biden is the certified winner. Before I move on, if you enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Also, hit that notification button so you always catch up on the latest premiere each night. Also, find me on Twitter at DavidZhangBTN, where I am the most active. We also have Parler and Facebook. Now let's talk about the cities of Beijing, Dalian, and Shenyang has issued more restrictions as new CCP virus cases were discovered. Now, the Guanshenyun residential compound in Dalian has been locked down for almost 10 days thus far. On the evening of December 28th, residents were heard shouting from their apartment windows, pleading authorities to provide them with food and other living necessities. On Tuesday, China's National Health Commission announced new infection figures in Beijing, Dalian, and Shenyang, while confirming asymptomatic carriers counted in a separate category. They didn't mention how those cases were detected though. But the central government data contradicts those of the local governments. Now, in the Jinping New District, officials have started to use paper seals to secure people's door in this video. If the seal is broken, authority will assume the family violated regulations and will isolate the family at a quarantine center. These seals remind me of when pandemic homes had been declared death. But these people were still alive. There is also a new strain of the mutation of the COVID-19 strain, which has appeared in US Colorado. Let me just give you a timeline of when the CCP virus took place last year. And this will help you understand exactly just how much censorship has China been with this virus. Around this time last year, Chinese authorities acknowledged that an unknown form of pneumonia was spreading in the city of Wuhan. But it was already too late. What we know now as COVID-19 had already broken out across the city and possibly beyond. In the months that followed, authorities bungled prevention measures and covered up the number of infections. They enacted travel restrictions weeks too late, as Chinese travelers seeded outbreaks around the world and prevented international researchers from visiting the country to investigate the origin of the virus that causes COVID-19. As the virus spread around the world, the regime in Beijing began an aggressive campaign to spread disinformation claiming that the virus didn't originate from China. That narrative continues to today. Meanwhile, the regime punishes citizens who dare to publicize information that didn't fit this narrative. That authoritarian control had succeeded in containing the virus. This was their official news. As a new wave hit Beijing now and part of the northeastern China, locals are once again kept in the dark as authorities are sealing off neighborhoods after neighborhoods. China's initial response was rife with missteps. Wuhan health authorities only confirmed the outbreak on December 31st of 2019, after a whistleblower doctor had shared information on social media. But by that time, they had locked down on January 23rd. 5 million people already left Wuhan to go everywhere else. And it was around Chinese New Year, so this massive traveling cannot be prevented. And despite the containment measures, new clusters continued to emerge throughout China as the year went by. Authorities usually require mass nucleic acid testing soon after. During an outbreak in October in the eastern city of Qingdao, authorities claimed that after testing all 11 million residents, they found 0 new infections. How is that possible? The CCP governments typically share little information with its citizens though. In one classified document issued in February, Chinese authorities explicitly stated that the pandemic-related documents were to be treated as top secrets. And on March 12th, a spokesperson for China's foreign ministry, Zhao Lijian, claimed in a Twitter post that the CCP virus was brought to Wuhan by the US Army. His baseless claim and other similar accusations by Chinese diplomats sparked widespread condemnations by the Western officials. And on November 29th, the Chinese state-run Global Times published an article suggesting that the virus originated from the Indian subcontinent. Recently, Chinese state-run media misquoted scientists' research to claim that the virus originated from Italy. They switched from US to India and then to Italy. The Chinese regime and its media has also been promoting the theory that the local COVID-19 outbreaks stem from frozen food supply chains. Authorities claim that they detected virus strains on imported frozen salmon, shrimp, pork, beef, and other foods from a range of countries. Now we have Norway, Russia, Indonesia, and also Brazil and Germany. From the beginning, Wuhan authorities silenced whistleblower doctors such as iPhone and Li Wenliang, who were the first to note on social media that their hospital were admitting patients with a new, potentially contagious pneumonia-like disease. They were summoned by the police and reprimanded. The populace is getting so fed up in China about the way local authorities are handling the situation. In March, residents under lockdown in Wuhan heckled a group of Chinese officials touring the area, shouting complaints from their apartments, such as, "It's fake, everything's fake." I want to share this with you because a new year is approaching and we have potentially a new mutated strain spreading. Because of the censorship in China, the US particularly has suffered a major blowback to its economy in the past year. We just have to be aware of what the political indication for this is going forward. Alright, this will be the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed the show. Now make sure to let me know in the comment below what you would like to see and hear. As well, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I saw comments telling me that they're not receiving notifications, so make sure to hit that notification bell to keep up with the latest updates. As always, thanks for watching and have a good night.